The sound of clicking heels echoed through the marble lobby of Riverside National Bank. Rebecca Gray, the proud branch manager, carried herself like she owned the place. Her posture was sharp, her eyes cold, and her voice carried authority that demanded obedience. It was another busy afternoon when the glass doors opened, letting in a tall, elderly man with weathered hands, sun-darkened skin, and a calm, dignified presence. He wore a simple flannel shirt, worn jeans, and work boots still dusted with traces of red earth. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said softly, holding a thick envelope close to his chest. "I'd like to make a deposit, please." Rebecca barely looked up from her screen. The tone of his voice irritated her. Too slow, too polite. "Take a number," she replied coldly. "We don't handle cash deposits without appointments." The man nodded kindly, not offended. "It's quite a bit of money," he added gently. "I didn't want to carry it around too long." That caught her attention. She turned and finally looked at him. Her eyes widened slightly when he opened the envelope and revealed stacks of neatly banded $100 bills, thick enough to fill both hands. The line behind him went quiet. The sight of so much cash made a few customers whisper. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "Where did you get all that money?" she demanded. The old man blinked, confused by the sudden aggression. "I'm a farmer, ma'am. Been working the same land for 50 years. She scoffed. "A farmer? Carrying this much cash? Do I look like I was born yesterday?" The man frowned slightly, still polite. "It's harvest season. I just sold part of my crop. Thought I'd keep it safe in the bank." Rebecca's lips curled into a smirk. "Keep it safe? You mean hide it?" "Because this," she grabbed the envelope and ripped it open, letting the cash spill across the marble counter. "Doesn't look like an honest man's money." Gasps rippled through the room. The bills fluttered and scattered onto the floor, sliding under her desk and toward the feet of waiting customers. Phones came out. People began recording. The old man's eyes glistened with disbelief. His hands trembled slightly. "Ma'am, please," he said softly. "That's my life's work." Rebecca crossed her arms. "Then your life's work looks filthy. I won't accept drug money in my branch." He knelt down slowly, knees stiff with age, and began gathering the scattered bills one by one. His rough fingers shook as he picked them up, careful not to miss even a single one. The sound of his old joints creaking filled the silent lobby. Every eye was on him, some sympathetic, some judgmental. A young woman near the exit whispered to her phone camera, "This is awful. She's making him crawl for his money." Rebecca noticed the recording but didn't care. In fact, she seemed to enjoy the attention. "Maybe next time you'll learn how to behave in a respectable establishment," she said with a cruel smile. The old man looked up at her, still kneeling, his calm eyes filled with quiet dignity. "Respect, ma'am," he said slowly, "isn't about clothes or skin. It's about how you treat people." Rebecca's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her arrogance. "Security," she shouted. "Get this man out before he contaminates the counter with his dirty money." Security Officer Daniels, a broad man with kind eyes, stepped forward uneasily. "Ma'am, maybe we should just let him finish picking up his—" "I said remove him." Rebecca snapped. "He's disturbing customers." The officer hesitated, looking down at the old man who was now placing the gathered cash back into his worn leather bag. The man's hands were steady again. There was something about him, a calmness that didn't fit the humiliation he was enduring. Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Tell me your name, old man," she demanded. He stood up straight, meeting her gaze with quiet strength. "Samuel Jefferson," he said simply, "and I'll be filing a complaint about this treatment." Rebecca laughed sharply. "Complaint? Against me?" She gestured around. "Do you even know who I am? I run this branch." Samuel gave a small nod. "Then you'll understand why I'll need your employee number for the report." Her laughter echoed across the lobby, dripping with mockery. "You really think someone like you could get anyone to listen?" He didn't answer. He simply adjusted his flannel sleeve, revealing a faint glimmer of a sleek, expensive watch beneath the worn fabric. No one noticed yet, but soon they would. The crowd began to murmur as more people filmed the scene. A middle-aged man whispered, "That's too much cash for a random farmer." Rebecca turned back to her desk, pretending not to hear. "Sir, if you don't leave now, I'll have the police involved. Maybe they can check if that money smells like weed or something." Samuel took a slow breath. "You think I'm a criminal," he said softly, "just because of how I look." Rebecca tilted her chin upward. "Because I know trouble when I see it." He nodded once, his calmness unsettling her. "I see," he said quietly. "Well, ma'am, I reckon we'll both find out soon enough who's really in trouble." Rebecca frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Samuel smiled faintly, slipping the last few bills into his bag. "You'll know in a few minutes." And with that, he straightened up, his posture tall and unshaken despite the humiliation. The entire lobby watched him walk toward the waiting area with quiet confidence, like a man who knew something no one else did. The bank clock read 2:53 p.m. Rebecca sneered and muttered under her breath, "Crazy old fool." But in exactly 7 minutes, the same man she mocked would make a single phone call that would turn her entire world upside down. The tension in the bank hung thick as smoke. Rebecca strutted behind the counter, pretending to type on her computer, but her hands trembled slightly. The quiet whispers of customers made her skin crawl. A few people had stopped pretending. They were filming openly now. Samuel Jefferson sat silently on one of the waiting chairs, his weathered hands folded on his cane. He wasn't angry, just patient, as if he had seen moments like this too many times in his long life. His eyes wandered around the marble floor, still catching the faint sparkle of a few bills that had slipped under a counter. Security Officer Daniels approached him carefully. "Sir," he said softly, "I'm sorry about all this. Miss Gray can be, well, she's strict." Samuel looked up, offering a tired smile. "Strict's fine, son. Disrespect ain't." Daniels nodded slowly, unsure what to say. He had seen pride in many men, but Samuel's quiet dignity carried something deeper, an unspoken power. "Would you like me to help you make that deposit?" Before Samuel could answer, Rebecca's voice sliced through the room. "Daniels, step away from him. You're not authorized to handle unverified cash." The officer clenched his jaw but obeyed. The customers were growing restless. A mother whispered, "This doesn't feel right. She's humiliating him." Rebecca turned sharply, glaring at the crowd. "Anyone who's not conducting business can step outside," she barked. Her assistant, a nervous young woman named Clara, tugged at her sleeve. "Ma'am, maybe we should." "Enough, Clara," Rebecca snapped. "This man is lying. Look at him. Do you really believe a farmer could bring in nearly $1 million in cash?" Samuel's voice came from the waiting area, calm but steady. "Ma'am, I told you. It's harvest season. 50 years of honest work. My land's been good to me." Rebecca snorted. "Oh, please. Do you expect me to believe that story?" Samuel looked at her for a long moment. His voice softened, but there was steel beneath the surface. "No, ma'am. I don't expect you to believe it. I expect you to learn from it." The words hung in the air, heavy and certain. Rebecca turned red with anger. "Security, I want this man detained until the police arrive." Daniels hesitated. "On what grounds, ma'am?" "Suspicion of money laundering," she shouted. "Look at that bag. No paperwork, no ID, no appointment." Samuel slowly reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather wallet. Inside was an ID card and a business card that gleamed faintly under the lights. He handed them to Daniels without a word. The officer frowned, glancing at the name printed in gold letters, Jefferson Agricultural Holdings. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but before he could say anything, Rebecca snatched the card from his hand. "Oh, spare me," she said mockingly. "Printing fake business cards now." But something about the card felt too real. The texture, the weight, the embossed logo. It wasn't something from a cheap printer. Samuel stood slowly, resting on his cane. "Ma'am, all I wanted was to make a deposit. But since you'd rather accuse than assist, perhaps it's time someone else handled this." Rebecca crossed her arms. "Someone else? Who exactly?" Samuel checked the time on his wristwatch, a silver piece that gleamed elegantly despite its scratches. "You'll see soon enough." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "What? You're going to call your lawyer?" she sneered. Samuel's lips curved in a faint smile. "Something like that." The clock read 2:56 p.m. Rebecca huffed and turned back toward her computer. "Clara, go call the police. Tell them we have a suspicious customer." Clara froze. "Ma'am, maybe we shouldn't." "Now," Rebecca barked. The young woman reluctantly picked up the phone, her hands shaking. Around them, whispers swelled like a wave. "He didn't do anything wrong," someone murmured. "Why is she so cruel?" As Clara dialed, Samuel's old flip phone buzzed. The sound was strangely out of place among the sleek smartphones and computer screens. He flipped it open calmly. "Yes, Sarah," he said quietly. I'm here at the Riverside branch. Yes, that one. Rebecca's head snapped up. Who's Sarah? Your drug contact. Samuel ignored her, still speaking with measured patience. Activate Protocol 7, please. Full review, effective immediately. The words meant nothing to anyone in the lobby, but Daniel's gut told him something important had just happened. Rebecca let out a sarcastic laugh. Oh, that's cute. You're pretending to call someone in charge. Sir, please stop embarrassing yourself. Samuel closed the phone and looked at her. His voice was calm, but there was weight in every word. Ma'am, you're about to learn that respect can't be bought, but it sure can be lost. Rebecca opened her mouth to respond, but her computer screen suddenly flickered. Then, a large red notification appeared. Corporate audit in progress. Do not shut down system. Clara gasped. Ma'am, that's the corporate override system. What? Rebecca leaned closer, confused. That's impossible. Only headquarters can. Her words trailed off as her phone rang. The caller ID displayed CEO Margaret Torres. She froze. No way. Samuel adjusted his hat, his expression calm and unreadable. Rebecca's hand shook as she answered. Hello, Ms. Torres. The voice on the other end was sharp and cold. Rebecca Gray, is there a reason my system just flagged your branch for an emergency conduct review? Rebecca's voice faltered. Ma'am, there's been a misunderstanding. Some old man brought suspicious cash. Old man? The CEO interrupted. Are you speaking about Mr. Samuel Jefferson? The entire room went silent. Rebecca's lips parted, speechless. Samuel gave her a small, knowing nod. The CEO's voice grew icy. Rebecca, that man is one of our largest agricultural partners. He supplies our sustainability foundation and holds accounts that exceed your branch's annual revenue. I suggest you treat him with the respect he deserves. Rebecca's knees weakened. Her face turned pale. I didn't know, she whispered. But it was too late. The crowd had heard everything. Phones were still recording. Justice had begun its quiet, unstoppable march. Rebecca's hand trembled as she held the phone. Every word from the CEO hit her like thunder. The entire bank was frozen in silence. Every customer now staring at her, waiting to see what would happen next. Ma'am, Rebecca stammered. I had no idea who he was. The money, it looked suspicious. The voice on the other end was sharp. You judged a client by his skin and clothes, Rebecca. That is not how we treat our partners. Mr. Jefferson has supported this bank for decades. He helped fund our rural outreach program. Rebecca's throat went dry. Her confidence crumbled like sand. Ma'am, please, I was just doing my job. Your job, the CEO interrupted, is to serve every customer with respect. Security footage and social media reports already show otherwise. I'm sending the regional director there right now. Stay where you are. The call ended. The line went dead, but the damage was done. Rebecca slowly looked around the room. The eyes of the customers were no longer curious. They were disgusted. Some shook their heads. A few whispered angrily. Samuel remained seated, calm and still. His presence filled the room like quiet authority. He wasn't gloating. He didn't need to. Clara stepped forward carefully. Mr. Jefferson, I am so sorry, she said softly. If you'd allow me, I'll help process your deposit. Samuel smiled gently. Thank you, young lady. That's mighty kind of you. Rebecca slammed her hand on the counter. Clara, don't touch that cash. Clara flinched. Ma'am, the CEO just said. I don't care what she said. Rebecca snapped, panic rising in her voice. I'm still the manager here. But even as she shouted, the glass doors at the front of the bank swung open. A man in a dark gray suit stepped inside, flanked by two assistants. His badge read Regional Director, Alan Pierce. The murmurs stopped instantly. Rebecca straightened her blazer and forced a smile. Mr. Pierce, I can explain. Pierce raised a hand. No need. I already saw the footage. He glanced toward Samuel and nodded respectfully. Mr. Jefferson, sir. It's an honor. Samuel stood slowly and extended a hand. The honor's mine, son. Pierce shook it firmly, then turned his sharp gaze on Rebecca. Miss Gray, you're suspended effective immediately. Rebecca's jaw dropped. Suspended? You can't do that without a hearing. Pierce's tone was cold. The hearing will come, but the decision's already made. The CEO herself requested your removal. You'll collect your belongings and leave the premises now. The color drained from Rebecca's face. This isn't fair. Samuel adjusted his hat. Fair, he said softly. Fair would have been you treating folks right before someone had to teach you how. Rebecca's lip quivered. You set me up. You wanted this. Samuel shook his head slowly. No, ma'am. I wanted respect. You gave me the rest. The crowd erupted in murmurs again, but this time they weren't whispers, they were cheers. One woman clapped quietly, and others followed until the sound filled the whole bank. Rebecca's pride shattered. Tears welled in her eyes as she gathered her purse and walked toward the exit. The same floor she had made Samuel pick his money up from now felt like it was swallowing her whole. At the door, she turned once more, her voice shaking. You'll regret this. Samuel met her gaze with calm eyes. I don't regret standing up, ma'am. Maybe you'll remember this moment and do better next time. Rebecca said nothing. She pushed through the doors and disappeared into the bright afternoon sunlight. Alan Pierce sighed. Mr. Jefferson, on behalf of the bank, I apologize deeply for this. Your service to this institution and to your community means more than we can express. Samuel smiled humbly. I appreciate that, son. I ain't one for making trouble. I just believe in right and wrong. Pierce nodded. We'll make it right. Your new account manager will be personally assigned from the executive team. Samuel chuckled softly. That won't be necessary. Just treat folks fair, no matter who walks through that door. That's all I ask. Pierce smiled respectfully. Yes, sir. As Samuel turned to leave, the customers stepped aside, some clapping again, others thanking him for standing tall. A young man approached and whispered, Sir, that was the bravest thing I've seen. My dad went through the same once. Samuel patted his shoulder. Then make sure you don't let anyone else go through it again. Outside, the wind blew gently against the fields beyond the street. Samuel looked up at the sky and smiled. Mama always said, dignity ain't something you wear. It's something you keep. His old truck waited at the curb, its paint faded but shining in the sun. He climbed in, started the engine, and drove away slowly, leaving behind a lesson that would echo far beyond the walls of that bank. Inside, Clara watched from the window, her eyes filled with admiration. He didn't raise his voice once, she whispered. Pierce nodded quietly. That's what real strength looks like. The camera of a bystander caught the final moment as Samuel's truck disappeared down the road, an image that would soon spread across every corner of the internet, inspiring millions that BY evening. The story had spread far beyond the walls of the small riverside bank. Someone's phone recording of the incident, Rebecca throwing Samuel's money, the confrontation, and her firing, had gone viral within hours. The title on the video read, Elderly Farmer Humiliated by Bank Manager. Then Karma hits instantly. Millions watched as Samuel calmly picked up his money and stood his ground. His quiet strength struck a chord with people everywhere. Hashtags like hashtag respect the elderly, hashtag stand for dignity, and hashtag Samuel Jefferson trended across social media. Meanwhile, Rebecca sat alone in her car in the bank parking lot. The once confident manager stared at her phone in disbelief. Her face was everywhere, news outlets, reaction videos, and comment sections filled with outrage. Heartless, racist, cruel. The words cut deeper than she expected. She wanted to turn the phone off, but the noise wouldn't stop. Tears ran down her cheeks. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. But deep down, she knew it wasn't about the money. It was about her attitude, the pride that blinded her from seeing the humanity in the man she mocked. At that same moment, Samuel sat at his farmhouse miles away, sipping tea on his porch. His granddaughter, Lila, showed him her phone. Grandpa, you're famous. Look at this, millions of views. Samuel chuckled softly. I didn't do nothing special, sweetheart. I just stood my ground. Lila smiled. People are calling you a hero. Samuel shook his head. If standing up for respect makes you a hero, then the world's forgetting what ordinary decency looks like. A car pulled into his driveway. Out stepped a familiar figure, Alan Pierce, the regional director. He held a folder in his hands and a grateful smile on his face. Mr. Jefferson, Pierce said, walking up the porch steps, I wanted to visit you personally. The CEO sends her regards. She was deeply moved by how you handled yourself today. Samuel nodded kindly. Appreciate that, son. I hope that young lady's all right. Pierce sighed. Rebecca? She's under review. The board might let her go permanently. The footage caused quite a stir. Samuel's gaze softened. Losing a job hurts, but sometimes losing your pride teaches more. Pierce looked down, Thoughtful. You're right, sir. Maybe this will open a few eyes. He handed Samuel the folder. This is for you. Confirmation that your deposit has been secured and a personal letter from the CEO. Samuel opened the envelope and read the neat handwriting inside. Mr. Jefferson, thank you for reminding us all that true integrity doesn't need to shout. You have our deepest respect and gratitude. Margaret Torres, CEO, Riverside Financial Group. He smiled faintly. Well, I guess some good came from it. Pierce nodded. More than you think. We've received hundreds of messages from people inspired by your story. Our corporate office is planning a new initiative called the Jefferson Policy, training every employee in empathy, fairness, and respect. Samuel's eyes twinkled. Name's a bit too grand, don't you think? Pierce grinned. Not at all, sir. You earned it. That night, the farm was quiet except for the crickets. Samuel sat on his porch, gazing at the stars. He thought of his late wife, Mary, and whispered, You always said to keep my heart clean, no matter what. I think I finally understand what you meant. Meanwhile, in a small apartment across town, Rebecca sat at her desk scrolling through endless hate messages. She buried her face in her hands. How did it all go so wrong? Her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from an unknown number. Sometimes life humbles us to help us grow. Don't let this break you. Let it teach you. There was no name, but she knew who it was. The simplicity of the words pierced her guilt. She stared at the message for a long time, tears quietly falling. The next morning, the story made headlines across major networks. Reporters called it the farmer's dignity incident. TV hosts discussed it as a symbol of grace under pressure. People from around the world sent letters to Samuel, farmers, teachers, veterans, all thanking him for reminding them of the power of patience. At the bank, a new sign appeared on the wall behind the counters. Every customer deserves respect, inspired by Samuel Jefferson. Clara stood proudly beneath it as she served her next client. She smiled warmly, her voice steady. Good morning, sir. How can I help you today? Across town, Rebecca walked toward a community center. The same woman who had once thrown money on the floor now carried boxes of food for the poor. The director greeted her kindly. You're the new volunteer? Rebecca nodded, her eyes humble. Yes, ma'am. I'm here to learn. In time, her name faded from the headlines, but the lesson remained. For Samuel, life returned to its peaceful rhythm. The fields grew golden again, and his laughter filled the air whenever Lila visited. But sometimes, when he passed by the bank, he'd smile quietly, knowing he didn't just make a deposit of money that day. He made a deposit of change. Weeks passed since the day the world met Samuel Jefferson. What started as a viral moment had quietly transformed into something deeper, a movement built on respect, humility, and second chances. The town of Riverside, once just another quiet farming community, now carried a message that had reached millions. Dignity costs nothing, but it changes everything. At the bank, things looked different. Smiles were warmer, greetings were genuine, and people spoke softer. Clara had been promoted to assistant manager. On her first day in the new role, she placed a framed photo of Samuel on her desk, a reminder to always lead with kindness. Every new employee now watched a short training video titled The Jefferson Standard. It began with Samuel's calm voice, saying, When you look at someone, don't see what they wear or how much they bring. See who they are. That's the real value of a person. Across town, Rebecca lived quietly. She had moved into a smaller apartment near the community center. At first, she couldn't step outside without people recognizing her face. Some stared, others whispered. But over time, her humility began to show. She volunteered daily, sweeping floors, organizing food drives, and serving those she once might have ignored. One evening, as the sun set over Riverside, she stayed late to help close the center. The director approached her. Rebecca, she said kindly, you've been working hard here. Would you consider leading one of our outreach programs? Rebecca blinked in surprise. Me? After everything? The director smiled. You're learning what compassion really means. Sometimes the ones who fall the hardest understand grace the best. Rebecca hesitated but nodded. I'd be honored. That night, as she walked home, she passed the old bank building. Through the glass, she saw a new plaque by the entrance. Riverside Financial, built on respect. Beneath it, smaller letters read, Inspired by the wisdom of Mr. Samuel Jefferson. Rebecca stood there for a long time, tears welling in her eyes. She whispered softly, "I wish I could thank him." Meanwhile, Samuel sat at his farmhouse kitchen table, reading letters that came from around the world. One from Kenya said, "Your story gave my father courage to face his employer." Another from Brazil read, "You reminded me that silence can be strength." Lila came running in with her phone. "Grandpa, look. The governor wants to honor you at the State Hall next week." Samuel chuckled. "Oh, child, I don't need all that fuss. I just want to tend my fields." Lila smiled. "But, Grandpa, you've become a voice for people who've been ignored." He looked out the window, where golden fields swayed under the soft wind. "I didn't speak for them, sweetheart. I just reminded the world to listen." Days later, Samuel reluctantly agreed to attend the ceremony. The town hall was packed. Officials, reporters, and locals filled every seat. As he stepped on stage, the crowd rose in applause. Cameras flashed, but Samuel didn't look for fame. He looked for faces. Ordinary people, each with their own story. When it was time to speak, he leaned into the microphone and said simply, "Dignity ain't something a man earns. It's something he's born with. You can't take it away, only hide it behind pride or fear. But when you see it in others, you see a bit of your own humanity too." The room was silent for a long moment before a wave of applause rolled through. After the ceremony, as Samuel was leaving, a familiar figure stood by the door, Rebecca. She looked nervous, holding a small envelope. "Mr. Jefferson," she began softly. Samuel paused. "Miss Gray," he said kindly. "Didn't expect to see you here." She looked down. "I wanted to apologize. Truly, I was blind with pride. You didn't deserve what I did." Her voice cracked. "I'm trying to be better." Samuel studied her for a moment, then smiled gently. "We all stumble, child. What matters is what you do when you stand back up." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for forgiving me." "I already did," he said simply. "Long before today." She handed him the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a photo of her volunteering at the center. It read, "I can't undo what I did, but I can honor what you taught me. Thank you for giving me back my humanity." Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then you've already learned the hardest part, humility." As she walked away, the weight that had followed her for weeks seemed lighter. She smiled for the first time in months. Later that night, Samuel returned home. Lila met him on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. "Grandpa," she said, "do you think the world will ever really change?" Samuel looked up at the stars and smiled. "It already is, child. One heart at a time." The camera would fade on that moment. A quiet man on his porch, a world forever changed by his patience. His story wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about grace, redemption, and the power of quiet strength. And as the credits rolled, his voice echoed one last time. "Respect ain't a favor. It's a duty." A year passed since the day Samuel Jefferson's quiet strength shook the world. The viral video had long faded from trending lists, but its message had rooted itself in hearts and communities far beyond Riverside. What started as one man's humiliation had become a symbol of respect and resilience, a reminder that true power lies in calmness, not cruelty. The Jefferson name now stood for something greater. Across the state, schools and banks adopted the Jefferson Code, a short pledge displayed on walls. Treat every person with respect, no matter their story, their skin, or their struggle. Even the governor's office issued a proclamation declaring October 12th as Dignity Day, inspired by Samuel's example. On his farm, Samuel continued his simple life. The fields were full, the soil rich, and the air peaceful. His granddaughter Lila, now 17, helped him plant rows of corn while humming softly. "Grandpa," she said, "do you know people at my school talk about you like you're some kind of legend?" Samuel chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Legend, huh? I'm just an old man trying to grow something worth harvesting." Lila smiled. "But you did. You planted respect. Now everyone's reaping it." He looked at her proudly. "Then that means I did my job." Later that day, a sleek black car pulled into the dirt road leading to the farmhouse. Out stepped a well-dressed woman carrying a camera crew behind her. It was Margaret Torres, the CEO of Riverside Financial. She approached Samuel with a warm smile. "Mr. Jefferson, I finally get to meet you in person. We're filming a short documentary for our company's annual meeting. It's about change and how one man inspired it." Samuel shook his head modestly. "I didn't change nothing, ma'am. Folks just remembered what mattered." Torres laughed softly. That's exactly why we need your words. They filmed him walking through his fields, his cane tapping softly against the earth. He spoke about patience, respect, and how pride destroys more than it protects. Every sentence came from a place of honesty. When the interview ended, Torres handed him a small envelope. Inside was a certificate titled, Honorary Partner, Jefferson Agricultural Grant. It was a fund in his name to support young farmers struggling to start their businesses. Samuel smiled, deeply moved. You didn't have to do this. Torres replied gently. You didn't have to forgive us, but you did. This is our way of giving back. As the camera crew left, Samuel watched the sunset paint the sky gold. He whispered to himself, forgiveness is the only seed that grows without rain. Across town, Rebecca stood outside the same community center where she had once swept floors. Now she was its assistant director. Her once cold expression had softened into kindness. People respected her again, not for her title, but for her sincerity. Every Thursday, she held workshops for young workers about empathy and communication. On the wall of her classroom hung a photo of Samuel shaking her hand. Beneath it were the words, change starts the moment pride ends. Sometimes, she'd glance at that photo and smile faintly. It reminded her that failure isn't final, unless you stop learning. Months later, Lila graduated from high school. The ceremony was held outdoors, under the open sky. Samuel sat in the front row, cane resting beside him. When Lila's name was called, she stepped on stage, holding her speech paper nervously. She began, my grandpa once told me, dignity ain't something you earn. It's something you protect. He taught me that strength isn't loud, it's steady. The crowd listened intently. Today, I want to dedicate my diploma to him, to every person who ever stood tall when the world tried to push them down. Because sometimes, the quietest voice in the room carries the loudest truth. Tears welled in Samuel's eyes. He clapped softly, pride shining brighter than the sun above. After the ceremony, reporters approached him again. Mr. Jefferson, you've become a national symbol. How do you feel about being called the man who taught the world respect? Samuel laughed gently. Son, I didn't teach the world anything new. I just reminded it of what it already knew but forgot. That night, as stars filled the sky, he sat on his porch beside Lila. Fireflies danced across the dark fields, and the wind whispered through the crops. Lila leaned her head on his shoulder. Grandpa, do you think your story will be remembered forever? Samuel smiled. Forever's a mighty long time, child. But if it helps one person choose kindness over pride tomorrow, that's forever enough for me. The porch light flickered gently. The fields rustled with life. And somewhere far beyond that quiet farm, his story continued to inspire, not through fame, but through hearts that now carried his lesson forward. In cities and schools, in offices and homes, people shared his quote like a prayer. Respect costs nothing, but it buys peace. It was more than a story now. It was a legacy. As the camera of the world faded out for the last time, Samuel's silhouette remained against the setting sun, a symbol of dignity unshaken by hate, a reminder that grace will always rise higher than pride. And his final words, spoken softly into the golden air, lingered like a timeless echo. You can take a man's money, but not his worth.